We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. I'm Mark Angelides. We're continuing our conversation with Tim Donner. Tim, we're coming into the last segment of the show, and I'd like to do a desert island top 2 for topics, because there's so much to talk about, so little time. And I think the final 2 stories I'd like to cover this week are the Signal debacle, which was the messaging app on which Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Mike Walls, JD Vance ended up in unbeknownst communication with the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic whilst discussing attacks on Houthi rebels out in Yemen. And of course, I'd also like to grab a couple of questions on the deportation drama that's taking place. But first thing, with this Signal app thing, it's been such a roller coaster of a media story. So it broke on Monday. By Tuesday, Democrats in Congress were calling for Pete Hegseth's resignation. Elizabeth Warren called everybody involved criminals, as did Senator Chris Coons, said that, this is something that every person on this thing would be in jail for. It's a crime for which they would be in jail. But then by Wednesday, it had been revealed that CISA, which is the CISI, which is the cybersecurity federal agency, recommended people, high-level government officials and politicians use end-to-end encryption devices, quote, such as Signal. So It was a government policy a government recommendation under Joe Biden that people use Signal. And then you've got Democrats in 2025 now saying people who are using Signal for these kind of talks, they need to resign.
Yes.
Where did it all go so wrong? What kind of a story is this?
It just shows you how desperate they are. When we talked a few weeks ago, I said, the Democrats are making a huge mistake by, violently opposing everything Trump is doing. They would be smarter to sit tight or play possum, as James Carville said, and wait for Trump to make a mistake, and then they could pounce on him. Well, this is a mistake, not by Trump, but by his administration. But at this point, they have so little credibility because they've attacked everything from every different angle. And so this story, now they're dramatically overreacting by calling for resignations because of a simple mistake. It was an unforced error, but Mike Walls has gone onto TV and explained that he takes full responsibility. It didn't have any actual impact on a very successful attack on the Houthis. And so they're just making themselves look like fools to ask for the resignation of people who basically they made a mistake. And
let me come back to you on that. Did they make a mistake? Did JD Vance and Pete Hegseth make a mistake using an app that is specifically recommended by CISA?
No, the mistake was that somehow this far left-wing editor of The Atlantic was somehow included in the chain. Everybody, the truth is, Mark, everybody in the intelligence community around Washington and the world probably are using Signal.
Oh, yeah.
They're using Signal as their go-to device because it is encrypted and safe. Yep. And the messages on it are deleted immediately after they are sent. And now, of course, there's a thing, well, you have to send it to your own government email account because otherwise there's no record of an official conversation or policy discussion. So, I mean, this gets very complicated, but I think the only real loser in this is the people that developed the Signal app, because now somebody's going to come up with a different app that maybe is even more secure. I don't think you could have that, but the whole thing just, calling for people to resign, for cabinet officers to resign because of a mistake that didn't really have
That they didn't
any
make.
impact,
Yeah.
that they didn't make and didn't have any impact
Whilst
on
following protocols
foreign
put in place
attack.
by the previous administration.
I mean, Elizabeth Warren really, I mean,
Yeah.
how low can she go?
Well, I thought she'd reached the inverse zenith when she did the DNA test and discovered that she'd been lying about her race for decades. One final word on this topic, Tim, is the fourth estate just seems so desperate to keep this signal scandal going. I want to give you some, I checked out the figures on Wednesday, March 26th, and I was just scouting around all of the digital pages of the of the media, and it averages. Do you want to know what it averages? I'll give you an example. CNN have 17 stories, 17 articles in their above the fold digital area,
Right.
17 stories. This is Wednesday, 2 days after the story broke. 6 of them, which is 35% of the stories, were about the signal scandal. I'm doing the air quotes thing there. For those of you just listening on the radio. Signal scandal, 35%. And that was pretty much matched across the board by most of the left-leaning outlets. They are desperate to make this the biggest story of the year so far. And it doesn't even really impact Donald Trump at all. It's exactly what you said, that they're so desperate to create a fury that they're grasping at straws on things. Now,
in politics, any kind of story that comes out has a certain amount of what we would call a shelf life.
yes.
There's a 1-day story, there's a 2-day story, right? There's a week-long story. I'd say this is about a 4 or 5-day story. By next week, the media will have exhausted the whole thing because there's nothing else to say, because no denials have been issued. Nobody's been found to have committed a crime or have been scandalized. There was some carelessness somewhere. And it didn't even result in any impact on a very successful foreign attack on a terrorist group in the Middle East.
Tim, I'm sorry to say this, but I think we ran out of time to talk about the deportation drama taking place. So we'll just leave it with one final figure for you. 82% of Americans approve of deporting violent criminal aliens. And yet, it seems the media is not quite on board with that. Tim Donner, thanks ever so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark. Always fun.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I have been your host, Mark Angelides, and our special guest today has been longtime host of this here show, Tim Donner. I'd like to send my special thanks to you at home who've taken the time to tune in and join us each and every week. I do appreciate it. Please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.